Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. Joining me right now is Tim Phillips. He is the president of Americans for Prosperity. We're talking about the government shutdown and the rollout of Obamacare. Mr. Phillips, as always, it's great to talk with you again.
Good talking to you too, John.
All right, so as of Tuesday here, the Senate and the House, they've kind of punted bills back and forth, playing political ping pong with this funding of the government and Obamacare. We know this is about Obamacare here. And a Senate Minority Leader, I should say, Mitch McConnell, is has been trying to gauge some support for some sort of funding bill that would, at one point he was talking about funding the government for a week, but talking about all this kind of back and forth, we're really just looking at, posturing, I guess you could say. What's your take on where things stand right now in these kind of half-hearted efforts by Congress to reach a deal on this?
I think the biggest problem is with the president. President Obama consistently refuses to negotiate in good faith on one of the most complex laws that's ever been passed by the Congress, certainly in the modern era, which is Obamacare. And the president has delayed different aspects of it that weren't working or weren't ready by the deadline coming up on October 1. He's exempted certain people, unions and other folks, from different provisions of the law. So he's made a lot of changes to this so-called signature achievement of his from his first term. And yet when folks in Congress, Republicans in Congress, want to make some honest, good faith changes, he suddenly says, oh no, we can't negotiate, I won't be held up. Well, he's been changing the law for the last 6 months for this run-up, John. I think that's disingenuous on the president's part.
And what do you think about the president's comments today? He used the bully pulpit. He went to the Rose Garden, the Oval Office, and kind of lambasted Republicans for what they've been doing. Do you think this is going to come back and haunt the president for saying this?
I do. The president's poll numbers have consistently dropped, John, over the last 6 months. And I think part of it is the American people have seen this movie before. The president comes out, demagogues people that have just simply a good faith disagreement on a piece of legislation or an issue. He attacks them in the most personal terms, accuses them of all sorts of things, while his position remains inflexible and unwilling in any way to compromise. And I think the American people have caught on. Every poll also out there shows that support for Obamacare has been consistently dropping. And not just among conservatives who long ago realized this law was terrible, but among younger Americans who have been sympathetic to this law and among a lot of kind of more moderate voters in swing states. They have decided that the impact of Obamacare on their personal health care or the health care of their loved ones is going to be bad. And so that's why support for Obamacare is waning. I think the president's in trouble on this. I really do.
Poll numbers have also shown that the American people are very much against shutting down the government as a means to oppose this the president's health care law here. That's just one example of where we see diverging opinions on this issue. People don't support the law, but they don't want the government to be shut down as a means to stop it. And a lot of Republicans held up this deadline as their last chance to really stop this law. Of course, it's been implemented now. Do you think that Republicans have failed now that the Obamacare exchanges have officially opened for business?
Well, the strategy we've pursued at Americans for Prosperity has been a long-term strategy. We believe that it takes a determined grassroots and message and television push over a long period of time to drive down support for Obamacare, which we've seen happen, and also to encourage Americans as they consider signing up starting today to understand that if they sign up, it's a disaster for them. Premiums are going to go up. In the end, they'll have access to fewer specialists and doctors who are going to be opting out of, in effect, what is Medicaid, which is a failing federal bureaucracy already. They're going to have limited options down the road. We know that. And so that's been the focal point of Americans for Prosperity. I think it's a multi-front effort to repeal Obamacare. Our view is it's a long-term effort. We want to make sure this stays in front of the American people, and we want to make sure that we are isolating the impact. Take the politics out. Just ask Americans to look at the impact that Obamacare is going to have on their own health care or the health care of their aging parents or of their children or of their loved ones. If we continue to do that, John, I believe we're going to see this law repealed. I can't predict exactly when, but we're winning with the American people by focusing on the impact that this law has on their health care. and frankly, how inconsistent and hypocritical the president has been in giving exemptions to members of Congress and their staffs, and giving other exemptions to powerful political or unions, or in some cases, big corporations. We want to continue showing that hypocrisy as well.
I know AFP has been, trying to oppose this law for a long time, going all the way back to 2009 with the bus tours and things of that nature. Of course, there was some success for conservatives in the 2010 elections, but since then we've seen the Supreme Court uphold this law. We saw the president reelected again. I know you guys are still actively working to repeal this law, and a lot of conservatives are. But do you think that's still possible? And is there starting to be a feeling amongst conservatives that maybe a delay might give them the time they need? What do you think is the best possible outcome at this point, now that the shutdown has taken hold?
Well, with the shutdown taking hold, it's here. Whatever your strategy is in returning Obamacare, the shutdown is here. And I think it's important to keep the pressure on the president to genuinely reconsider different elements of this law or delay it. He delayed some key provisions of it, including the one that impacts the businesses having to provide the coverage. I think he ought to delay the individual mandate on Americans, making it a crime to not buy health insurance, in effect, or at least you have to pay a fine, a civil fine anyway. I do think we ought to keep the pressure on him to do that. I can tell you at Americans for Prosperity, though, this is a multi-front effort. Who would have thought when this law passed back in 2010 that we could get over half the states to refuse to launch these state-based health exchanges, forcing the HHS and the federal government to do so? That's been a victory at the grassroots for folks across our side of the aisle on the conservative side. Who would have thought last summer, when the Supreme Court ruled that Obamacare was being upheld, but that states could reject Medicaid expansion, who would have thought a year ago that we could get right at half the states, or a little more as it stands today, to refuse this federal money and to refuse to expand this failing federal bureaucracy, which is Medicaid, into their states? So we have seen some victories specifically on the policy front with Obamacare, not as much as we would want. Of course we want to repeal, but those are two big victories I just mentioned. And on the broader cultural view of this law, we've succeeded in driving, and when I say we, I mean the broad conservative movement, not just Americans for Prosperity. We're part of it, but it's Tea Party groups, it's conservative media, it's good, solid conservative politicians who've stood tall on this issue, the ones who have, and most of them have. It's those when I say that. But support is at an all-time low. It's under 40% in most of the public polls I've seen now for Obamacare. So we've come a long way since that bitter day in the spring of 2010 when they passed this law using parliamentary tricks. We've come a long way. And I think if we stay the course on this, keep fighting, keep pushing on every front, I do think there's an opportunity to repeal this law.
Now, Monday night in Congress, there seemed to be some, rumblings among the more moderate Republicans, Peter King of New York being one of them, saying, let's just go ahead and pass a clean CR with nothing about Obamacare in it. Let's go ahead and go for that, and then use maybe the debt ceiling as an opportunity to push for more changes to the health care law or anything like that. What's your take on folks like Peter King from New York who hinted that they might be willing to pass a clean CR at this stage?
Well, look, the last thing I'm going to do is try to give advice to these guys on Capitol Hill. I mean, I'm a grassroots guy.
But you have a lot of experience up there on the Hill. You have a lot of experience.
Well, our message that we're asking our activists to continue pressing the Hill on is, look, make sure you're continuing the fight to repeal Obamacare. There are a lot of paths to get there. The one that we're focusing on at Americans for Prosperity is, as much as possible, delivering a powerful message during this open enrollment period. Because, I mean, John, you know what's happening out there. Enroll America, all these liberal nonprofits funded with our tax dollars, all the TV ads pouring in from Health and Human Services and from every other federal agency, all the insurance industry ads pouring in. It's hundreds of millions of dollars and tens of thousands of people pressing these younger Americans to sign up starting today. At AFP, we felt that with an infrastructure in 35 states, real grassroots troops, full-time staff on the ground, the way we could make the biggest difference, frankly, was to get out of Washington and focus on educating and talking to these Americans who are being cynically targeted by the Obama administration to sign up for Obamacare. And that's where we think we can make the biggest difference. You know, look, there are a lot of good groups in Washington that are focusing on this congressional battle. Candidly, we think with our infrastructure in the states, this is where we can make the biggest difference. Because I'm telling you, right now, John, literally millions of Americans, mostly younger men and women, are having to make a decision. Do I sign up for Obamacare or do I not sign up for Obamacare? Am I going to be intimidated or coerced into this? We know how cynical the approach is from the left. John, they've admitted, they've said, look, we need healthy, younger Americans to sign up for Obamacare and pay exorbitant health care premiums because we need their money to fund the rest of the Obamacare bureaucracy. That's wrong, it's cynical, and we've got to fight that.
Well, we'll see where it goes. I mean, this fight is certainly not going away. We got 6 months of this open enrollment period here. I know you guys are going to continue your educational efforts, your outreach efforts as well. So we'll see where things go from here. But certainly things have changed, at least in the terms of Obamacare. The exchanges open up today. We heard about some glitches, but we will see where things go from here. Tim Phillips from Americans for Prosperity, thanks so much for being with us.
John.
A pleasure speaking with you. And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.